What's going on, guys? Mageblood here. Today I want to go over the conclusion of my quest to acquire the Mageblood belt. As you can see, we've got the belt. We're going to go over all the changes I made to the character. We're going to talk about the strategy that I used to make currency. There's a little plot twist at the end of the project. A savior emerged from the shadows and made sure that we were able to complete it, even though the price of the Mageblood belt spiked suddenly on us. We'll talk about that a little bit. And we'll go over a few of the mistakes I made, stuff like that. Do a little bit of story time. So if that interests you, stick around. All right. Let's talk about the flasks I'm using. So now I'm using this one for regen, as well as the reduction to fire damage and resist, move speed. This one gives us spell suppression, phasing, and corrupted blood immunity, and then a bunch of armor. And now we're using a bottled fate. I wanted to keep corrupted soul in the build, so I picked up a glorious vanity here, and we got it with the corrupted soul. And then here we've got some block, spell damage, which does work for our traps, even though it doesn't work for righteous fire. Area of effect, awesome. Damage over time, life, and well, this one's just life. This one is life and regen, and this one's damage over time, fire damage. And so I feel like I got pretty lucky. This one's some armor there, and that's a dead stat there. We don't care about mana regen. So that allowed us to keep a similar life and ES totals. I think it's like 500 to 700 less than what I had before. And our just regular tooltip damage here is about 10k lower, which is pretty negligible. And if we pop the flask, it goes up quite a bit. And now it's pretty close to being where the damage was beforehand. And then if you factor in on the boss the 10% extra damage on consecrated ground, it's definitely a small but significant damage increase. I mean, really, those are the only changes. And now we've got crazy move speed, and quality of life is through the roof. If we want capped res, we can just pop this flask in and do a quick point swap from one life node to corrupted blood immunity, and then we're good to go for content that requires it. And in terms of the strategy that I used that yielded the most currency, I would say I was having the most fun, making the most money when I was just sticking to my solo strat. Whole Harbinger, shrines. Let's pull up the tree here. It looks different now, but I had, and there is a video on the channel that goes over the different strategies that I was using as I went through the project in the previous update videos. But basically, Harbinger, shrines, Beyond, a little bit of delirium, and then the influence. Those are the things that made me the money. It came down to exalted shards, ancient orbs, annulment orbs, these and these. That's where I made the bulk of my money. The invitations I sold for about 100C a piece, and that was pretty consistent, though. Doing a little trade in the middle of the video here. Gotta make that money. Gotta make that money. So, in order to set up all of that currency, the big change was when I started using these. And they're fairly cheap. Sometimes you can get them for 20C, but the average is like 25. These make a huge difference in the amount of currency that I pulled out of each map. I also really enjoy the hunted traders. And then if you want to, you can also throw on Beyond or whatever if you want to juice a little bit more. I would do that sometimes. Now I'm using Breach, but that's because I have this belt and I'm just playing around with different strategies now. Sort of post-project fun. And then in terms of scarabs, I only ever used polished, or pardon me, rusted for the most part. If I had a bunch, I would use polished, and once or twice I started using these, but they're just expensive, and I don't feel like you need it. Generally, I felt like the currency was going pretty smoothly. Now, here are the mistakes that I made. I switched strategies midway through the project, and even though I think I made a little bit of currency in the, let's call it the duo farming era of the project, where I liquidated everything, made an Orobot, did about a week or so of farming with a buddy. We made good money, but I didn't really factor in the amount of setup time and upkeep time that strategy was going to require. It took me a day to level the character, took me a day to find the gear for the character. There was an hour or two of selling shit every day. The other guy had to do a bunch of selling. Or rather purchasing and rolling maps and whatever, so... And then unfortunately I lost my ass on a lot of the gear pieces that I purchased. In fact, I'm still selling a couple of them, and I mean, we're getting to where some of these I'm not even... I think I bought this for 10. So, unfortunate. And then another mistake I made was... I bought this Watcher's Eye for 45x. So I estimate that... So I would have made about, let's call it 50x in the 2 days of setup time, just in the time that I was making zero money because I was just buying gear and leveling character. And I spent 45. There's 100x or more right there that I would have been ahead. I would have gotten the belt earlier. And as it turned out, the price of Mageblood spiked on me right at the end of the gauntlet, and I wasn't going to make it. It was going to start going up too fast for me to catch up. And I mean, maybe I would have been able to do it like at the very end of the league, but that wouldn't have been any fun. Luckily for me, a fellow streamer, Dezelmain, was looking out for me, and I didn't even know it. He was watching the price and sent me a message the other day and asked me how close I was. I told him. He came in with the emergency 100x. And we bought the belt for 423. Now, the cheapest one that I saw when I looked a little bit ago was about 450. So it's still going up. And so, yeah, let's throw a map in the device and we'll sort of talk about the conclusions that I had from the project. And you can decide, does getting a little bit of help at the end when the price went crazy, does that invalidate everything? Even though, as I just talked about, like you can pretty easily see I made some mistakes that cost me way more than the 100 that I needed at the end there. And so if I had played better, if I had been more diligent, I could have just made the money myself. But luckily for me, there was a buddy who was looking out for me. So big shout out to Dezelmain. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. He does delve content. Fantastic streamer, really nice guy, very helpful. Lots of knowledge, which he shares freely with anybody that cares to stop in and ask. So, having said that, I would say it's probably going to take you about 3 weeks to do this if you're using a strategy similar to the ones that you've seen me lay out on this channel. And so, I would say you need to start at some point during month 1 of the league. A perfect scenario, I think, is that you spend only 1 week setting your character up. And then whatever, if you can get to the point where you can just farm the maps and do the content, stop buying upgrades. And just farm the currency out. And chances are, if you do it that way, you'll be able to get your Mageblood in probably even less time than that, because they're going to be less expensive at the beginning to midpoint of the league. So that would be my advice. Pick a strategy and stick with it. experimentation, I guess, would be a thing you should probably do either beforehand or in a different time frame where you're not actually trying to farm for the item. I was doing a thing I knew was working, and then I chose to experiment, and that made it so that it was going to take me way longer, and if circumstances had been different, it might have meant that I didn't get the Mageblood this week. So keep that in mind when you're deciding if you want to do this for yourself. And obviously, I'm just going to farm up the currency and repay the loan here in a day or two. And so for me, I viewed it as, you know, I got to skate by unscathed by the mistakes that I made. But I think as proof of concept, you don't need to be doing giant bulk trades on TFT or doing exclusively Mega Delirium, you know, Ultra, Super Beyond, etc., in order to get your hands on these chase items. Was it worth it? Absolutely. No question. The belt is awesome. I'm going to have it in standard now forever. And any build that I would want to make in that permanent league is going to be, I'm going to be able to enhance it with either a Headhunter or a Mageblood. And that's going to be great for the channel in terms of being able to make content in the long term. I enjoyed the build to begin with, and I think that's another thing, is if you've already found a build that works, and you use that to farm the Mageblood, and you slot it in, then it just feels way, way better. I'm running around with 60 plus K armor, tons of regen, you can switch the Flasks around. Yeah, it was totally worth it. Because I would have been farming anyway. This was just an exercise ultimately in deciding on a goal. And that's what this game's all about in the end, is setting a personal goal for yourself and then using the tools at your disposal to achieve it. And in case I haven't been clear about it, I don't care if people use TFT. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I use it from time to time. But I got the impression that people might think that acquiring 300 or 400 Exalt as a solo player without doing some of those things was just sort of like a laughable fool's errand. And that's not the case. You can totally make that. I had to spend, you know, probably 10, 15x on Flasks and whatever else to get the character rolling once I put the belt on. And I already have almost 40x in the bank again. So I'm, you know, I've made almost half again what was loaned to me to make the project happen. I biffed and lost 100x along the way. We didn't even talk about how I had 2 House of Mirrors cards. That's how I made the Aurabot. And those also now have gone up significantly in value. So, again, you can do this if you want to. There's nothing stopping you from having any item that you want to have in the game. Now, we could start to talk about, you know, these characters that have 5, 6, 7 mirrors worth of gear on them. That's, I might be a league or two away from being able to step into that arena. In terms of picking one specific item and acquiring it, a chase unique, I think that that's something that basically anybody can do. And I'm really happy with that. I can't say for sure that the following statement is true. This is just kind of like my feeling, but I don't think that the way the game was before would have facilitated this in the way that the current Atlas setup and the passive tree and all of that has made possible. And so I think the game's in the best state that it's ever been in to be a solo mapper. And so, yeah, the moral of the story is, you know, if you set your mind to a goal in the game, you can achieve it without having to use any real specific strategy. You can just find something that works and go with it and acquire the items that you want to acquire. I'm rambling at this point, so I will call it a day there. In terms of what's coming next for the channel, I have some ideas going forward. I want to try my hand at some end of the league double corruptions. For example, I think it'd be fun to double corrupt a bunch of these perfectly rolled or divined with the enchant on it. And then we might try and buy a Headhunter at the end of the league and double corrupt that, see what happens there, that type of thing. And I want to try doing some coverage on the channel of the spoiler season when that begins, so look forward to that. as well as next league. There's already talk amongst the the group of buddies that I have on streaming and in game and whatever. And there's a few people that would like to see me do a fireball build again, so that's a possibility for next league. As well as I've wanted to do some kind of melee for a long time. I might try and force that next league, or we might do that in standard. I have a mirror in standard, as well as I'll have whatever currency and etc. that I bring back from this league. And so we could also try some meme content with really expensive gear for the RF character in standard once that rolls over. And yeah, I'd also like to do some more basic guide content for the game, just generally, because now I've actually taken the time to learn how to set up your June missions and Aisling and all of that. I know more about how to game it so that you get a better chance of having the corruption chambers on your Alba temples, if that's what you want. Stuff like that there's plenty of content on YouTube already for, but there isn't any resource that I have readily available that I can point people to when they ask me stuff like that. So there's just a list of a bunch of different things off the top of my head that I'm interested in pursuing for the channel. So even though I think the videos are going to slow down here a little bit for the next couple weeks before we really start to get more information about the next league, fear not, I have big plans going forward. And yeah, this was a really fun project, and we'll probably end up doing something similar to this next league. But yeah, for now, please do hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Appreciate you.